here. So it's a brilliant white paintable caulking, and I like to just fill in the small crack that occurs when the quarter round is put up against the baseboard. So it just eliminates that crack. So what you want to do is just take a very small bead, run it along the length of the baseboard, and then just take your finger and smooth it out. Now you're going to want to also do it to the top where it meets up against the wall if you are going to be painting the wall as well. So same thing, just to eliminate the small gap in between the baseboard and the wall, so it looks nice and clean. Take your finger, smooth it out, and then you want that to dry. So you'll probably want to leave that for a couple hours before you go and put any primer on it. Now that the caulking is nice and hard, so you just want to smooth it out nice and smooth. Make sure you get a decent brush. Spend a little bit of money on the brush because you definitely get what you pay for. Just want to put on a nice amount. Make sure you get it nice and covered. You don't want any runs, so primer dries fairly quick, but you want to make sure you don't put on too much. There. Now within about an hour, that'll be nice and dry, and I'll probably put on the first coat of the trim paint an hour and a half, 2 hours. Maybe. Now that the baseboard is nice and dry and free of any rough areas, what you want to do is put on your first coat of white latex door and trim paint. Now there's a lot of different brands that you can use. I use a Seco door and trim paint. It has a really nice pearl finish. So that's what I use. Now, using a smaller brush sometimes is a little bit easier for applying the correct amount of paint and just for the edging. Now, what I'll do is always paint the baseboard first before I find it the wall. Much easier to paint the wall after. So you want to just get a decent amount of paint on your brush, and then just like the primer, you're going to just put it on nice and even, nice and smooth, because you don't want to put too much. You'll end up getting some paint runs. Just nice even strokes with the brush, and don't worry about getting it on the wall, because when you do the wall color you'll be able to clean that up. It is very important just to make sure you have enough paint on your brush, but definitely not too much. I usually put on about that much. There's nothing worse than coming back and seeing a bunch of paint. If you don't do a lot of painting, you may want to put something down to protect the floor. It might make it a little easier. I can just run my brush along the bottom of the quarter round without getting any on the floor, but that comes from a lot of practice. Helps to eliminate any stoppage marks. Gives you a nice smooth finish. Alright, so we'll leave that for a few hours, then we'll come back to put on the second coat. Alright, well, I went ahead and gave the baseboards the second coat. So now after I've waited a number of hours, I'm going to start the edging. Now, I use this frog tape. The yellow stuff is for delicate trim work. There's also the green tape, but I prefer using this one. It prevents the paint from bleeding through. It is quite expensive. It depends where you live. Here it's about $10 for a roll. What you want to do is just put it a little bit past on top of the baseboard, and then just make sure that you are just in that crease where the wall meets up to the top of the baseboard. And just go along little by little. And tear off a little bit at the end here. And then just with your thumb, guide it into that crease so you get a nice straight line. You just follow these principles for around the rest of the room. And just take your finger, make sure it's nice and tight. If it's not and it's sticking up in some places, then the paint will bleed through. Now I'm using another Seco product for the paint. It is a matte finish, so it's not glossy, it's quite flat. It's a nice finish. So once again, I like to use the smaller brushes for the edging. So if you use a heavier brush, sometimes you can just end up putting on too much paint. Get about that much on and just run it along the wall. Nice even brush strokes. And just kind of feather out the paint. And then once that's done, I like to take the tape off right away. Since I'm trying to get this all done here today, I don't want to pull too quickly. The paint should be nice and dry. I've given it quite a long time, but just to prevent any paint from lifting off the baseboard, I'm going to go nice and slow. And there you go. You have a nice straight line. And then for this part, I'll roll the paint on the wall. So for the rolling application, get a good roller cage and then a good roller sleeve. You want at least 10 millimeter. That's a good thickness. In a year, and they start to get a little squeaky when you wash them out. So there you go. Now I will let that dry for maybe an hour.
This is nice and dry now.
And what I usually do for the last coat, because you really need to put on 2 good coats for nice coverage. So you can just faintly see a little bit through the gray here. So there's no need to re-tape the trim because you have a nice line there. You don't have to get right down
Just
to the bottom.
get as close as I can.
So just follow that as close as you can. You don't want to go past the straight line, but it gives you something that you can follow. Getting down as close as possible. Smooth that out. There, now that finishes it nice. Then I'll just grab my roller and give it one more coat. As you can see, the second coat is almost completely dry, and we have a nice clean straight line along the baseboard. So